What up? What up? What up? Welcome to another episode of NewOrleans.Basketball and NewOrleans.Network podcast. As always, I am your host, Raphael Rattler, joined by my fellow middle brother, Garrick Rattler. What's popping with you, bro?
What up, bro? Everything's all good on this side. Everyone in Louisiana, early voting has started. Wrong side. See, I got my sticker when it did my civic duty. Pops will be proud of me. But yeah, go out there, take care of that if you can. It took me 5 minutes inside the Tremaine Center. Walked in, walked out, handled that business. So do what you need to do. Outside of that, man, everything's good, man. Enjoy. What are we in? Like day, depending on college. Definitely enjoying that. Be able to take in some football. The WNBA finals. Shout out to Brina Ionescu hitting Steph Curry in France-esque shot in the WNBA finals to put her team up 2-1 in that series. Got to see if Nafisia and Kayla McBride are gonna shake back. But that's a tough shot for Sabrina. Struggled the whole game, and she still came through when the team needed the most. And just what a shot, man. So it feels like sports nirvana until you start talking about that football team that performs in that building on. I don't want to talk about that. We don't need to go there. But don't fret. Pelican season starts next week. Preseason is over. The dress rehearsal, I guess, happened. I mean, whatever. The preseason is over. Time to get to the regular season games, and I'm excited to talk about their preseason and what's to look for coming. As the regular season starts. So, how's everything on your side, bro?
Everything is blessed. To your point, feels like basketball is finally here. We have arrived. We've gone through WNBA, almost wrapping up. We've gone through Olympics. We've gone through Summer League. We've gone through Celtics winning another championship, and we're finally back to the start of the season. Before we get into everything, make sure you guys are follow us on Twitter, on IG, on TikTok, on X. That's NO_basketball, no E. We're changing things up a little bit this year. It's soon to come. A lot more information on that. So make sure you will follow us on the right hashtag as NO_basketball, no E. Make sure you like us the episode below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel moving forward. So let's talk about the preseason. Uninspiring last two games. But you did saw a lot of good things. But the biggest thing is, like, it's hard to take anything away because you saw zero lineups of Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson. You saw zero lineups of B.I., Zion, DeJounte. You saw zero lineups of Zion with a B.I. with Jordan Hawkins because you didn't see your two best players on the floor. So, Willie Green has been asked a couple times over the week of, is that a concern to you that you didn't get to see your best players at least try to gather some type of chemistry together on the court? Now, how much chemistry are you getting in a preseason game? I don't know. It's probably a better indication based off practice and things like that. But altogether, he kind of alluded to the fact that it would have been nice to have, but they feel as if they're okay. So out the gates, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think the Pelicans should have played their main lineups in the preseason, or do you think the practice time is what's more valuable as they try to build that chemistry?
Stop me if you've heard this before, but a New Orleans team is injured and don't have their players and can't get everybody on the floor. It should just stop me when you hear something that you've heard before. But absolutely, I think that you probably would have loved to see Brandon Ingram, at least Brandon Ingram and Zion, because I mean Trey Murphy cannot state how big of a loss it is not to have him. Just as another weapon and someone that is going to be heavily utilized in the Pelicans rotation this season. But you kind of knew that he wasn't going to play, right, with his injury and being reevaluated. But Brandon Ingram and Zion, I mean, all accounts were that they were healthy. All accounts was that Brandon Ingram was cooking and killing and taking threes in training camp and things like that. And Zion was playing well. All the videos came out. He played in the previous preseason games. And so when you saw that this was the final preseason game in the dress rehearsal, as a lot of teams like to kind of attack it as, you just knew that this was going to be that opportunity to at least see DeJounte and Brandon Ingram and Zion and Daniel Tice on the floor. You just didn't get that. And that's the issue because, the chemistry between Brandon Ingram and Zion obviously isn't the best, but they've at least played, especially last season, some games together. The problem is that you haven't played with DeJounte and Daniel Tice bookending the two sides, regardless of who's that other person, whether it be CJ or Herb or whatever the case. So you're missing, obviously, building on chemistry between Brandon Ingram and Zion, but you don't even know who your starting five is, let alone putting them on the floor and getting some minutes together. Now, I do think, again, this is not to take away from a lot of those teams. The first 10 games for the Pelicans should be advantageous for the Pelicans, and a lot of them, right? Obviously, the Warriors are the Warriors and things like that, but you got a lot of Portlands in there and teams that are trying to find some things out about themselves and possibly even look towards draft picks early in the season. But at the same time, like, you wanted to hit the ground running, right? This was an opportunity to have this new DeJounte energy working itself out with Zion and Brandon Ingram, having him on the floor with, okay, this is where those guys like the ball when people who are not your teammates are guarding you. It's a lot different than when somebody is on your team barely pressing up against you, as opposed to we see what happens with Zion or Brandon Ingram are calling for the ball or looking for the ball. There are multiple people on them trying. So you wanted DeJounte to at least see some of what the defenses look like against Brandon Ingram, against Zion, where he could kind of attack and find his places. So you would have loved to have them on the floor. So of course I would have wanted to have them on the floor. Obviously they made the call about Zion in that last game, but I mean, I think, as the beginning of the season goes on, I mean, Zion said himself, he's not going to be in where he wants to be probably until game 20 or so.
I mean, most players probably,
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Most players do that, right? But I'm saying you're going to have all of this is going to take time to flesh itself out, whether they had played in preseason games or not. It's going to take some time for this to flesh itself out. But I think having them on at least a little bit in the preseason and having just a glimpse of what would happen would have been nice to see.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing that kind of stood out to me was, we talked about it. We highlighted after the first game that the fluidity of the offense just felt different. It felt like so much space on the court in that Magic game when Zion's the primary initiator of the offense, and you just got shooters everywhere on the wing. Well, something I was taking a look at in something that's important to this team, and Willie Green kind of talked about it in his post-practice presser, is that it's not just shooting the three, and we'll get to that because that is so important to this team, but it's consistent rim penetration and it's consistent pressure on the rim. And again, if Zion's in there, he's one of the best in history at doing that. So again, offense seems a little bit easier, but when he's not in there, that's where I like to look at the Pelicans, because you've seen Brandon Ingram take times of being aggressive and getting to the cup and getting to his shots and things like that. But what have we talked about over the past couple of years? There's always been a lack of, okay, if it's not one of those two guys, who is getting to the rim consistently? And again, you've seen CJ in that aspect. And at this point, I don't know if that's necessarily what you want from him all the time. Najee Marshall was probably the third best option last year. And so that's why you bring in the DeJounte Murray, because in the third game, and Brandon Ingram played and DeJounte played, but Zion sat, I felt as if the offense was lacking that. And DeJounte Murray kind of got into a rhythm closer to the halfway point where he started playing downhill. And I think part of that is, to your point, like when you insert a guy who was ball dominant in other roles in his entire career, and now he's coming to a new situation where he's playing point guard, he's trying to make sure that he's getting everybody else and he's trying to fit in, right? The same way, Zion said when he was first drafted to the team, I'm trying to fit in. When in reality, what you need is the Karl-Anthony Towns mentality that, this is what I bring to the team. And so I'm going to start with this right out the gates. And so I think that's going to be so crucial for the Pelicans. When Zion's not on the court, who is consistently attacking the rim and creating for other people so that offense doesn't seem as stagnant there?
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, that's that is the difference between a megastar, someone who you do not blink at giving $200 million for. Obviously, you want to protect yourself with all the things that the Pelicans put in the contract, and a guy that you're at a stalemate, right now with contract extensions. Brandon Ingram's a phenomenal player, but I mean, and DeJounte's a phenomenal player, but Zion's gravity and ability and what he does for everyone around him because of how you have to guard him. That is what makes Zion, Zion who he is, and why the offense seems to, no matter what's going on around him, Zion is always seeming to generate good offense. And so when he's not out there, and I think, friend of the pod, Will Guillory, tweeted it best. And this is why you wanted everybody out there, because it kind of felt like, your turn, my turn, right? Okay, BI, go ahead and do your thing, do what you do. And then DeJounte eventually in the second quarter was like, all right, let me kind of turn up a little bit and do some of those things. And it's going to take a while. You're bringing in a brand new starting point guard, not like a wing player, not a catch and shoot guy, not a guy who plays off of everybody. Appreciate the love, Steve. What up, Brian? What up? But yeah, like you're not bringing that guy in. You're bringing a point guard in, like a guy who's going to have the ball and making decisions. And so you want them to have as much time on the floor as possible. We saw when CJ first got to the Pelicans, it took a while for Brandon Ingram and CJ to kind of like, okay, like we don't have to do it like this. Like we can kind of get together. And then, once Zion came back, it was just like, okay, now we got to figure something else out. And so it takes a while, and it is going to take time. But I think what helps and what is going to help with this offense is the fact that DeJounte is such a basketball savant. And I think that Zion is so unselfish, but yet so productive while being so unselfish that they're going to find ways to kind of generate and do enough things and out of sheer talent, put up, be in games until they figure out what goes on. And it's going to be beholden on Willie Green and James Borrego and those guys to make sure that they are ironing out these kinks so that the offense doesn't look the way it does when Zion is not out there, because there's going to be times on the floor where Zion's not going to be on the floor and Brandon Ingram and DeJounte might be out there, or CJ and DeJounte might be out there. And so you want to make sure that you have enough efficient offense and efficient ways to get these guys in positions to score without having Zion on the floor, whether it be for, knock on wood, hopefully it does not happen, the I word, or because that's just, rotational purposes. He's not in the game at that point.
Right. And another thing that, I think is going to be so important to this team and to this franchise this season that you just would have liked to see more of is that I don't think the Pelicans played with enough pace. Like, for as athletic as a team that I know they were down Zion one game and down BI one game and down Trey all the rest of the games. But, like, for a team that's so athletic, and to your point that, still is going to have to go through some things in the half court to figure out their chemistry, you have to play in transition. You have to play to your strengths. And yeah, they got steals and deflections, but in terms of the pace, Jose was really the only one I felt like consistently was getting the ball up the court right away, taking the ball out of the basket, taking the ball from out of bounds, and pushing the pace. And I think that's going to be a mainstay for the Pelicans every single game. If you're not going to be the tallest team, you need to be the faster team and more athletic team, and create easy buckets so that you don't have to play in traffic while you're trying to figure out the kinks. So all in all, I mean, some things to really pay attention to as the season starts. But like you said, some of this is going to come with time on task. Some of this we don't know because it's happening behind the scenes and they're practicing. So who knows, where their chemistry is at this point. And some of it is going to rely on, do you just have more talent than the other team sometimes and able to kind of overcome your deficits, because the other team is going to have deficits too. I want to play a quick game of 3 up, 3 down with you. What are 3 things that, maybe was alarming from you, or maybe 1 or 2 things from you that was alarming from you from a down category in terms of this preseason?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna start off with the glaring elephant in the room that is making a lot of noise. It is very difficult to be a small ball team when you're not making threes. Mm-hmm. And I think, obviously you don't take, you can miss every shot one game and then make every shot the next game. And so, there's obviously push and pull there. But the Pelicans they weren't making a lot of the threes. And listen, they're willing to take them, which is great. And you want to have that push to push and shoot the three ball, and give the opponents things to worry about, right? You want to make sure that they're guarding that 3-point line and not able to build that wall in front of Brandon Ingram, Zion, and now DeJounte Murray. But if you're gonna play these small ball lineups, and part of it is Trey, again, cannot overstate how important Trey Murphy is for this team. We talked about it in our last pod in that first game, how even without Brandon Ingram and Trey, how they got up to 37, 38. And so if you add them in, you should be able to push that over a little bit, and maybe a lot of bit. And it just, the shots were not falling. And I think that for the Pelicans to be, they're obviously leaning in all into this smaller, faster, up-tempo, like you talk about, team. You're going to have to make shots, and it's going to be as simple as that. It can't just fall on, CJ and Jordan Hawkins and those guys hitting threes. Like Brandon Ingram's going to have to hit, he played this game and he took 2 threes and he took 3 and made 2 of them. And that's fine. Like that's, for the small amount, like that's good. He still was able to get it to his bag and score. But he took the threes. You're going to have to hit these threes because you're going to be, outsized in a lot of games as far as rebounding and trying to get to the rim and things like that. And so it was good to see that they were committed to the attempts. They got to start making some of these open threes and open shots. And again, maybe a lot of it was who was playing and towards the end and those numbers. But I think you got enough of a sample size to see, like, some of these guys are just, the 3-pointer isn't their preferred first option shot. And it's something that they're rewiring and reworking in. And I think it'll get there, right? As long as you keep taking the shots, eventually they'll get more comfortable falling and things like that. You saw Brandon Ingram miss his first 3 and then immediately get back and take the next one, a more contested 3, showing commitment to the work, showing belief in the work. I think all of the Pelicans players need to do that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. They shot 26% from 3. That's not going to get it done. To your point, they shot 38 threes per game. Again, that's hard to do with your starters don't play after halftime, or your best players don't play after halftime. But last year they shot 33. So, again, if you could be closer to that 40 range, the Pelicans were a top 5 3-point shooting team last year. Something tells you with the amount of talent that can shoot the 3 on this team, and once the rosters and rotations are finalized, that number will go back up in the direction they were. But to your point, you got to make them. And it goes back to what we were saying in the previous segment. If the threes aren't falling, you better be attacking the rim and getting to the free throw line. You can't just rely on one or the other. Something that stood out to me, and again, is going to be a big component of this team, they just didn't team attack the boards, right? For a team that's focusing on gang rebounding, because you don't have Jonas Valanciunas, you don't have traditional big man center that just swallows up every rebound. Everyone's going to have to be on the boards. In the first game, you saw a little bit, but in the second game, you kind of saw it rear its ugly head in terms of just rebounds that could easily have been gotten. And the rebound that brings it to life for me is versus OKC 2 years ago in the play-in when Brandon Ingram misses the free throw and the rebounds are right there and he just doesn't get. That's a wiring thing. That's a want-to thing. And so someone on this team, someone on this roster, I think early in the season, someone on this coaching staff is going to have to call out and call a timeout with 30 seconds into a game and say, that's not going to get it done. Everybody needs on the board. Because that Rockets game, even with some of the starters, like the ball was coming right to them and people were just walking away as if it was somebody else's job to get the rebound. And that mentality switch has to be, they don't have a choice, has to be there for the Pelicans in order for them to be successful this season. The last thing I'll talk about from a down perspective is that there's like a trend developing that like all preseason long, CJ McCollum was really getting attacked on the defensive end of the floor, right? Like literally they would pass the ball around until whoever CJ was guarding was able to attack. And you saw it in the OKC series last year, and you saw it a lot of the regular season last year. There's another reason why CJ McCollum as a sixth man has a good ring to it, because teams are going to be like, look at the West. Like teams are going to be identifying your weakness and time again going to be going at it. And if you're not making threes on one end and you're a liability on the other end, there's too much talent on this roster to not look at a different direction. So just something to be cognizant of. Again, CJ's coming off a great year, but something to, again, when you're trying to figure out what the rotation is and who should play more minutes, something to keep an eye on going into the season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you saw it against OKC in the playoffs. I mean, they found CJ every single play and attacked him. And listen, CJ is obviously a guy that has a lot of pride and has a lot of respect in the league and on his team. But like you said, and like he said at Media Day, the team has changed a lot around him since he got here. And so now when you look at this team, like when you traded for CJ, we talked about it. CJ was brought here to be the third person, right? The third guy. And ended up having to be the second guy some games. And then parts of the season had to be the number one option. Well, now, CJ, and listen, his offensive production is what it is. His shots are what they are. And the Pelicans are going to need his production. But you're talking about Zion, Brandon Ingram, DeJounte, Trey, before you start talking about, the pecking order as far as offensive shots or offensive players before you get to CJ. And so, Brian asked the question on the side, like, if he's not starting, where does that spacing and that floor spacing come from? And for me, we've talked about it, about a DeJounte, Herb, B.I. Zion, Daniel Tice type of starting five. It's going to take Tice spreading the floor, and it's going to take Brandon Ingram spacing the floor, and DeJounte taking shots, and Herb getting back to that 3-point barrage that he had middle of the season last season before he kind of slowed down himself. And so it's going to take, again, there's no, unless you're talking about CJ or Trey or Jordan Hawkins, in that starting five, there's not going to be that's your 3-point shooter. In my starting five, talking about DeJounte, Herb, B.I. Zion, and Tice, there's not going to be that's the 3-point shooter. What it's going to be is going to take guys to step up and step out of their comfort zone, meaning when you talk about Brandon Ingram and Zion and Daniel Tice and DeJounte Murray to shoot those threes. And then that's when you can bring CJ in, and he doesn't have to be attacked every single play. I mean, you look at the top of the West, there's not a lot of guys where you're looking at starting fives where you're like, yeah, well, that guy, like the OKC Thunder, you're not going at Shea, you're not going at Jalen, you're not going at Lou Dort, you're not going at Chet Holmgren. And so it's like, that everyone is able to hold their own on the other end. And that's going to be like, no matter how many points the Pelicans obviously didn't score enough points in those playoffs games against OKC. But what was alarming was that they just could not stop them finding CJ McCollum and attacking and going over and over again. And so, obviously these are the decisions that Willie Green is going to have to make. He talks about having a starting five in his mind, but for some reason doesn't want to tell anybody, even though JJ Redick told Zach Lowe like 2 months ago, well, yeah, this is a starting five. This is the starting five we starting. But again, everybody has their own. I think he's trying to keep the egos massaged until he absolutely has to, which is fine. Got to do what you got to do. But I do think that defensive component for CJ is something to take into consideration when you think about if he's not making the shots, what else can he contribute on the floor, and is he being a liability on that defensive side of the ball?
All right, so you go from 3 downs to 3 positives and 3 things that I think are a good indicator for the Pelicans going into the regular season. So I'll start with my first one. Brandon Ingram played 1 game, and for a player coming off, let's call it tumultuous offseason where he didn't get the money he wants from the team he wants, and nobody wants to trade for him, and everybody was bad-mouthing his name all season, saying he's not that good and this, that, and the other. Came out and looked really good. You alluded to it. I wanted to see what happened, not when BI shot his first three, but when he missed his first three. How are you going to respond? Were you going to shoot it again? And there were a couple, I'm not going to lie to you, there were a couple where I saw him hitch and thought about the three, and then he decided to get into the midi. And if he can eliminate that hesitation, I think that's huge. I mean, in the last game, again, he only played one game and he only played a half. He was the only starter that didn't have a negative plus minus while he was out there. He was decisive. Like, he looked like he was in control. He looked like a Brandon Ingram who's in rhythm, right? Like, when he is monitoring the floor and he's playmaking and he's getting to his spots, he's shooting the three, he's shooting the middle, he's doing it all, being a three-level scorer. I think that's huge for this team, right? Obviously, I think he's their second best player. I think that they need Brandon Ingram, like we've talked about all summer. I love the idea of Trey Murphy and what he can bring to this team. I just don't think that Trey is at the point where if everything is sold around Zion, throw it to Trey and let him go get you a bucket. I think you need Brandon Ingram to be able to deliver on those nights, then give you 30 on some nights and give you 35. I think you need the Jaylen Brown and the Jason Tatum for this team to be successful. And so from all indications, things have been going well. The only visual evidence you got as a fan or as a follower of this team, it went well. So again, you love to see that momentum going into the next season. What's something that stood out from a positive standpoint for you?
Yeah, I can't agree more. BI looked really good. He looked like a guy that was in control and kind of playing at his pace. I agree with you. I would like to see him kind of – the mid-range is where he gets it, and I get it. You're not going to flip it in a switch in one game. Again, all of this is going to take time, including the rewiring of Brandon Ingram. But I like the fact that he was committed to shooting threes, even when he missed that first one and shot that second one, which was more contested, and he made it. But he just looked like a guy that was in control. So I really did like that. Something that was super positive for me, and you already know where I'm going. Hawkeye was out of there, boy. He Jordan Hawkins looked like somebody who said, "Yeah, we're not gonna let last year happen again. I'm out here to be a part of the rotation, and you're gonna have to explain why I'm not if I'm not in it." And I think that's exactly what you wanted to see. You saw a guy who, first of all, I didn't think Jordan Hawkins could get more confident, but he looks like he's more confident from last year. Like on the floor, he looks like, I'm no longer a rookie, I belong here. And I think that's kind of the switch you wanted to have for him. He's knocking down shots. He's pulling up. He's attacking closeouts, which is going to be huge for him because he's treated like a 5-alarm fire on the 3-point line. And one thing that I really enjoy watching from him is that there were a couple of times where he would attack, and one time he'll go for a floater. One time he'll pull up for a mid-range. One time he'll throw a lob. One time he'll find a shooter. Like, he's showing a lot of different decision-making skills when he's attacking closeouts, when he's putting the ball on the ground. And that's something that's going to be super important for a guy who is a lethal shooter. And now you're saying that, okay, if I attack too hard on him, he's able to play under control and make decisions instead of just going for the three, or just going wild to the rim or doing whatever. He's making plays, he's hitting, he's finding the shooters, and things like that. He's gonna be one of those guys that you're gonna look at total like 4-point play opportunities, and he's gonna be on that list because he is really talented at drawing those fouls because he hangs in the air so long when he shoots those threes that when the guys are coming to close out like they know they need to, he's up there hanging and can draw that foul. And that's going to be huge for the Pelicans as well to get to the free throw line, get in the bonus, pair that with Zion and Brandon Ingram attacking. Like, those are the type of things that you look for to contribute to an entire team. And then lastly, like, he's given a hellacious effort on the defensive end. Is he going to be Tony Allen ever? No, he's not. Is he going to be Herb Jones? No, he's not. But can you compete and do enough, like Jason Kidd told Luka Doncic? Participate. Don't be a liability. Don't be a guy that is not only slight of frame, but also isn't giving over 110% energy on the defensive side of the ball. Jordan Hawkins spoke about it. That was the first thing he brought up at media day, and it looks like he's applying that to his game. So I'm super excited about year 2 Jordan Hawkins. I think that he has solidified himself. You saw him being 6-man, 7-man off the bench in some of these preseason games. So I think that he has solidified at least a spot in the rotation. And once the ball rolls out for regular season, if he's deployed in the correct way as a weapon, I think he can be really, really, really helpful for the Pelicans this season.
Yeah. The thing that stood out to me there was how his points were coming, right? Like last year, it was get in where you fit in, Rook. Like outside the Dallas game and a couple the Nuggets game and things like that, it was catch and shoot. And in this year, it felt more like a rhythm shooter, like a movement shooter, where he's constantly coming off a screen or coming off a hedge or finding ways to catch the ball in rhythm and score. And to your point, that's not kind of the detriment of seeing like has Brandon Ingram turn that switch, because he was never on the floor with Zion. He never got to capitalize off of Zion's gravity. Same thing with Hawk. I wanted to see, okay, when you're not on the floor with the star players, can you be your own offense in yourself? And I think the Pelicans are actually buying into that theory because, again, you hear Zion saying Hawk's going to be a big part of this team. But then when you see how he's utilized in terms of they're looking to get Jordan Hawkins the ball off of an offensive set or for a 2 to 3 minute span, that's what I was waiting to see. And so to your point, I couldn't agree more. I think year 2, sky's the limit for Jordan Hawkins, and we'll touch back here later in the show in terms of what I think he'd accomplished. The last thing I would say for ups, you talked about Willie Green keeping his cards close to his chest in terms of his starting lineup, knowing that there's a lot going on right now with the Pelicans rotation and trying to make sure you handle that the most politically correct way that you can. Here's what I'll say. I watched Yves Missi in every single game of his Baylor career. I watched him in the summer league. I watched him in the preseason. And every single game, this is a guy who didn't play a whole lot of basketball. And again, for the people that compare him to Jackson Hayes, it is just worlds apart from a mindset perspective. Maybe athletically, they're similar, things like that, but from a mindset perspective, I watched Yves Missi get better all through Baylor. Then I saw him in the preseason or in the summer league get better from game to game. And then I saw him in the preseason get better from game to game. And then I saw him in the second half of the third preseason game come out with the starters. And that was a different Yves Missi than you saw all before then, because he was able to do the things that he's good at. Right? Block shots with reckless abandon. Catch lobs because they're worried about DeJounte in the corner. Like, that's when you excel, when you're playing next to a bunch of talent. And so when I look at this, yes, I think Daniel Tice probably starts the season as center. But I think there's a world where you get to Yves Missi, very similar to Dick, I keep saying the name, Derek Lively. You get to the point where you're like, this guy is probably better utilized with the starting lineup. Not because he's shooting threes, but because he's a vertical threat. He may not be a three-point line threat, but when you come off a pick and roll and you're playing 5 out, you have to worry about him going on your head for alley-oop, right? And if Zion's coming at you off the pick and roll and he's diving, you got to make a decision, right? Whereas Daniel Tice doesn't necessarily give you that. I don't know if playing small ball necessarily gives you that, but having a 7-footer that can jump out the gym and that can block every shot next to the guys that are going to shoot the majority of the shots anyway, I think that there's something to that. I'll just put it that way. So his growth and what he was able to show over the course of the preseason, pay a lot of attention to it, because if there's a player, and we'll get to it later in the show, if there's a player that their next step could mean a total different team, I think Yves Missi is that player. So let's jump into prediction time. It's the season. We're going to come to you with the matchup versus the Bulls and stuff later. We got a couple days before the season starts. But this is that time where everyone thinks they got a shot. Everyone thinks that, their players are going to make all NBA. Everyone thinks everything, right? Let's go just prediction within the Pelicans team. So let's start first. Who do you think leads the team in scoring?
I think Zion leads the team in scoring. Yeah. I know it's a cop-out answer, but I think that Zion, we talk about the switch being flipped. I think that Zion, as well as he played last season, still didn't play Zion, like you said, until towards the end of the season after that Las Vegas trip. I think that Zion comes into this season from the get-go, from the jump, and I think he leads the team in scoring.
Okay. I agree with you, and the answer should be Zion. Now, Zion didn't shoot the most amount of shots per game or anything like that last year. The answer should be Zion, and all indications state as if they will be, and the team is playing around him. But who knows when it comes to this basketball team? This is a better question. Who do you think leads this team in assists?
That's good. That's more of a question. I think DeJounte does. I think he is going to take this point guard. He's talked all since he got here about how much talent is on the roster and how this is a point guard's dream. And you even see it in the preseason, even to a little bit of the detriment where he's trying to find people, overly finding people. And then he kind of clicks on his scoring, his what I call proactive basketball player, where he's just looking for his own shot. He does that later, but I think he's going to really try to make this work. And I think he's really going to make an effort to push Zion, to push Brandon Ingram, to find Trey and Herb and Hawk. I think he's going to take that duty really seriously. And I think he leads the team in assists.
I agree. DeJounte's shot wasn't falling all the preseason, but then you look at the box score and he didn't play that many minutes. It's like, man, he flirted with a triple-double, 12, 6, and 7.
Yep.
And I think there's going to be a lot of nights like that where DeJounte has 15 points, but he has 10 assists and he has 7. I think he's going to be, to your point, that type of player for this team. So I agree there. Here's the tougher one, and here's an important one. Who's going to lead this team in rebounds?
Whoo! That is a hell of a question. I would say the Pelicans are not going to be a great rebounding team, and I think that Zion leads them in rebounding. Okay. And I think a lot of it is going to be offensive rebounds. I think that Eves, Tice, and I thought Carlo, but maybe it's Trey Jemison, are all going to play, not spot minutes, but they're going to play center by committee. And there's going to be a lot of Zion at the 5 as well in closing games or whatever the case is. And I think that he is going to have to be the guy to rebound. And I think just off the sheer amount of minutes that he's going to play per game, I think that Zion is going to lead the team in rebound. That's interesting. What you think?
I think that's the easy answer.
I know. I'm risk averse on this. That's a hard question.
I think that's the easy answer. I'm gonna go Brandon Ingram. I think that again.
Okay.
I don't know if he's about to average 30 points a game and go say, "Here, give me my money," but I could see him saying, "If I've got 8 boards a game and I've got 24 points a game and I got 7 assists a game, you better pay me my money," right? I could see that aspect where he just goes and gets the board time and time. I'm thinking the Cavs game where he was playing pseudo center going versus Jared Allen and using his I think you're going to need that. I think it's going to be a mix, and every night you might have a different answer with Zion and Trey and BI. And I think it's probably going to be a mix of those 3 because I don't know if the centers are going to get enough minutes for them to lead in this category. But I'm going to go with BI on this answer. Here's a really interesting one. Who is going to lead this team in 3-pointers made?
I think CJ is going to continue to do that. I do. I think CJ. Okay. I think if CJ starts or if he comes off the bench, his job more than last year is going to be shoot it. And if you don't have to tell one person on this team to shoot the ball, it is one Christian James McCullough. And so I think that CJ's job, CJ's role, whether it's going to be a starter or a 6-man, is going to be the marksman. I think he's going to be the guy that's going to be shooting 80% of his shots, 75% of his shots will be 3-pointers. If everything is going the way it's supposed to be, if everybody's healthy and things like that, obviously, things like that are going to happen. But I do think CJ is more durable than like than other players we've seen on the team. Obviously, he's had his things as well. But to say he's one of the more durable players on the team says a lot. But I think he's going to get the most 3-point opportunities. I think Trey is going to be right there with him. But I just think with CJ's affinity for from by Willie Green, I think Willie Green has an affinity for CJ McCollum, which is fine. CJ's a great guy, great player. I think he's going to have the opportunities to get those shots up and stay in the game when maybe he messes up and things like that, and continue to get those 3-pointers up.
I disagree. I think you're on to something with Trey Murphy. I'll say this. The person I think the answer will be is Trey Murphy, because I think he's going to close a lot more games than CJ. I think he's going to have a lot more opportunities playing next to Zion and BI. I think DeJounte is going to be looking for Trey. You're going to need Trey's height. Yes, he's going to miss some games here and there, but I just think that from a minute standpoint, Trey's going to have more than CJ. And so I tend to think that's the smart answer.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best answer for the Pelicans is Brandon Ingram. I think if Brandon Ingram leads this team in 3-pointers made, this team is a different animal than anyone can expect. I think he gets the money he wants. I think everybody wins.
Well, I don't know. If I would say this, if Brandon Ingram leads the team in 3-pointers made.
Well, it depends on how many he picks.
I'm about to say with Jordan Hawkins, CJ, and Trey on that might be a recipe for me to be stressed out. Because why isn't CJ or Trey or Jordan Hawkins making more threes than Brandon Ingram? But I see what you're saying about it being the best, because if he's the guy out there, getting those threes up in the starting lineup, obviously, he's going to start, regardless of what CJ or Trey or whatever. Brandon Ingram's going to start. If he's the guy getting those shots up, and Brian asks, where does the floor space and where does the 3-point shots come from? If the answer is Brandon Ingram, then I think the Pelicans are happy.
Yeah, I think that answers a lot of the Pelicans questions for sure. Here's the last one. And I think there's an obvious answer, but I disagree. Who do you think leads this team in steals, blocks, and stocks?
There is an obvious answer, and therefore I will take the obvious answer. I'm sorry. Hey, listen, risk averse.
Okay.
All right, that's why I don't go to the casinos. That's why I don't go to the casinos. I'm very safe. I'm gonna put I would go with Herb. I just think Herb is he's a defensive mad scientist, and I think that I think I know where you're gonna go. I think I know where you're gonna go, and I think is where other people are not gonna go. I think I know exactly where you're going with this one. But I think that what makes Herb a fit for the starting lineup and makes him so great is that he's so good defensively. And I just think that he's a guy that's going to be tasked with, if obviously he's going to share it with DeJounte and maybe Zion, that guarding the best player, whatever. Regardless of if he's on the best player or not, he's the defensive leader of the team. And so even if he's not on the best player, if it's a DeJounte possession where he's on the best player, I see Herb just kind of free safety in it and seeing what and getting into those steals and getting into those help side blocks where he come across the paint and get them, and even some chase down blocks. So I would go with Herb Jones, but I'm willing to put money on where you're going with this, and I think it's different where I thought you were going, and I said it out loud. I think I know where you're going. Where you going? Who's going to lead the team in blocks, steals, and stocks?
So I'll space them out. So it's very similar to my answer to my 3-pointers made. The obvious answer is Herb. Now Herb has some rim protection behind him. Now Herb has a running mate behind him that actually has more steals than him in the last 3 years. Now you have a lot more chances to be aggressive and to gamble and do things. You already saw him in the preseason picking up right where he left off. I think blocks. I think the answer is going to be easy because I think he's going to be.
I just said that out loud. I think he would. Yeah, I think he would lead the team in blocks too.
I think he's going to be in the rotation. So I just sooner rather than later, and I think he's going to get minutes sooner rather than later. And I think he's the best shot blocker on the team, and you draft him for a reason. So I think that he's going to lead that category. In terms of stocks, very similar to my last one. I think the answer for the best case scenario for the Pelicans is Zion. I think Zion is the answer.
I figured that's where you were going. Mm-hmm.
Last year, when he turned into Zion, he started averaging 2 steals and a block per game. If Zion is the wild card that you got to worry about Herb and then DeJounte and then Eves is over here trying to take your head off, and oh, by the way, number 1 is skying through the air, like that's a different element to this team. And you saw a little bit in the preseason already when he played. He was in the passing lanes. He was anticipating steals when people weren't looking. If that guy is locked in, just like Brandon Ingram at the 3-point line, that makes this Pelicans team just a different one and a different aspect that people aren't necessarily looking at as far as what I can see in terms of NBA landscape. Any bold predictions for you? Anything, not just from the team, but just in general, any bold predictions you got to say, I'm going to I'll throw $5 in Vegas.
Yeah. I'm going to give you a bold one.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a bold one. I think the Pelicans have 2 knocking on the door of 3 All-Stars this season.
Ooh, okay.
I think that Brandon Ingram and Zion kick it into high gear. This is my bold prediction. They kick it into high gear, and they both come out with a lot to prove, and they both make the All-Star game. I think they both make it in a way that like Ant and Cat made it or something like that, like in that where they're good and they've been making the splash plays, and the record is showing in that way as well. Because I think if Brandon Ingram and Zion both make All-Stars, the Pelicans are a top 4 seed at that point in time, regardless. But I think as they work this out, I think with like a lot of injuries and a lot of guys not starting off the season healthy and things, I think DeJounte has a shot to return to his All-Star turn. I think he does. I think he has a shot to do it. It's gonna take the Pelicans, Brandon Ingram and Zion being there, but I think if BI and Zion are making their All-Star push, and DeJounte comes in and he's knocking on 20, knocking on 9 assists and 6 rebounds a game, doing his steal thing, doing his defensive thing, I think he gets at least in that conversation. So that's why I said 2.5. I think my bold prediction is that they will get 2, but I think that DeJounte has a shot to be in that conversation as well, and get back to some of his All-Star conversations.
Okay. I got a couple at you. Hear me out. I got some disclaimers. All right. First one.
Not the disclaimers.
First of all, I'm not making any predictions for the team because, there's too many things that happen through the course of the NBA season. I'm just making predictions for a player.
Okay.
If Zion plays 65 games, Zion's first team All NBA. I think that this Zion and what you've seen is something that you have not seen ever. Like even at Duke, I don't think you've put all the pieces together from a maturity standpoint. You've put all the pieces together from a conditioning standpoint. You put all the pieces together in terms of the talent around him. I think the buy-in on the defensive end, I just don't think all of them have come together until this season. And I think that if he played 70 last year, if he plays 70 again like this, I think it's going to be hard to keep Zion off a first-team All-NBA team. And again, like I said, I'm not making team predictions, but if he's first-team All-NBA, that means the Pelicans probably finished at a good spot there. Here's my second one. This is going to sound crazy, but this goes back to the last segment. I think that Jordan Hawkins finishes in the top 3 most improved. If that guy continues to build off what you've seen and what you've heard and to play around the talent that is already on the roster, his skill set complements it so well. Almost, I don't want to say more than Trey Murphy's, but close to that level, because it just gives you an element that you've been missing that just detracts from, I can't guard Zion with 11 players. Like that element And he's a sharpshooter. And it's not like we have a guy who can shoot threes. It's like, we have one of the guys who could be one of the best shooters in the league type feel to it. And so if he takes that next step with all the talent around him, I think, first of all, he'll be in the discussion for most improved. Second of all, the Pelicans are going to have some interesting conversations about somebody making $33 million who plays a similar role and plays a similar way and who might also be coming off the bench. I think some conversations will be had if Hawk lives up to what he's been able to kind of show and showcase so far. And then I got one last one, and we'll leave it out until next show. I think there's a world in which Yves Missi finishes in the top 5 for Rookie of the Year.
Woo! Spicy. I like it.
Here you go.
I think my bold take on Yves.
Bold takes. Don't aggravate me.
Right. My bold take on Yves would be that he ends up at the end of the season the starting center for the Pelicans. I think that he ends up being the starting center for the team. That would be my hot take. But that is spicy. Talk to me.
Okay, first of all, this is a draft in which everybody's kind of depending on their situation. I do think there's good players.
Nobody's talking about the number 1 pick. Like Risha Shade, like they don't even talk about him. Like it is.
But here's the thing: crazy. I watched Risha Shade in the preseason. He has some good games, and so I think it's going to be. I think the Rookie of the Year is going to come down to opportunity, which it always comes down to, like who has the green light to shoot every shot, right? The winning. What does that look at the Chet versus Victor conversation? Most of last year, you're like, well, it could be Chet. Look at him stats and look at the Thunder and blah, blah. And then Victor turned into Victor. It was like, oh, yeah, that's dead, right? I think this year, people are looking at, Zach Edey.
Zach Edey is a front runner. Yeah, he's a betting favorite.
You're looking at guys who are going to have the most opportunity for their team. And I just think that sooner rather than later, the coaching staff is going to say, let's see what Yves looks like with the starters. And let's see what Yves looks like playing next to talent. And I think you're going to have a very similar – I don't think he's the same player. I think he's a step below him just to start as Derek Lively. As soon as he started getting into the mix and playing with Luka and Kyrie, all of a sudden it was like, yeah, it's Chet, it's Victor. It was Jordan Hawkins at one point, and it's Derek Lively. That was the people kind of that was in that. Now, obviously, Brandon Miller and stuff like that, improved as the season went on, and it's a long season. But I think that in terms of opportunity, the entire world, even people who don't watch basketball, is like, oh, yeah, who is playing center for the Pelicans? If you can be the answer to that, I think that you have the shot in a draft where there is no Victor Wembanyama. You have a shot to rise to the top in terms of options and things like that. It is how I feel. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know.
No, I think getting Yves in the game with the starters earlier would be the right decision for the Pelicans franchise. Because think about it. All the talk about trading Brandon Ingram has been to find a center, right? Like trade Bri for Jared Allen, trade Bi for this player and a center. Well, what happens if you get halfway and like everybody's like, well, Yves is the center. Well, now if you are still, contemplating trading Brandon Ingram, now your options have opened up, right? Like, so now if Yves is your center for the next 4 or 5 years, if he plays well with the starters and you're like, okay, this is exactly what we need from a center, then it's like, okay, well, now we don't have to trade Brandon Ingram for a center. You could trade him for something else, and it opens up your options if indeed you still wanted to go that route. So I think getting Yves, because listen, Daniel Tice is not going to be part of the Pelicans' long-term future, and I think it is a very similar. Yes, he was, and I think it is a very similar situation to how the Pelicans or how people view the CJ McCollum situation, right? Like you have Jordan Hawkins and Trey Murphy, like, okay, these guys are the young stars going forward. And it's like, well, you can't play them because CJ is there, right? And the same situation with Yves, where if Tice is like serviceable and good, I think he will be serviceable and good. But then you plug Yves in there, he getting 2 blocks and a possession and flying all over the place. Then it's like at some point, that, like you say, very similar to the Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively situation. At some point, you say, well, if everything is even, or if one is a little bit more, why not go with the guy who's the part of the long-term plan and see what you got in a situation with all of these other young players and see how it fits moving forward. So it's not a bad, it's bold, but it's not a bad, a bad prediction. And it's something that if it works out for the Pelicans, it can really work out for the Pelicans.
Couldn't agree more. So that's all we got for you on this episode. Takeaways and predictions and things like that. Like we said, stay tuned because we got some exciting stuff coming from you guys. A lot more content this year. A lot this year. So again, this NBA season has more hype than I think any NBA season, maybe ever, in terms of the competitiveness and the quality of basketball that you should see. So I'm excited that we're not that far away. What you got left for the people, Garrick, as we wrap up the show?
Yes, sir. As always, you never know what people are going through. So give someone a smile today. Yeah, this is going to be a fire NBA season. I think, with so many teams and the new CBA is with putting talent here and can't stack the teams there. I think Boston is obviously who they are, but everybody else is like, man, if Denver is a 7 seed, it's not out of the realm of possibility. If the Pels are a 2 seed, it's not out of the realm of possibility. It's just so many different iterations of what could happen at the end, and the journey is the best part about it. So we're gonna be here covering it, getting ready for the regular season. Hope to see some of y'all at some games. If you're in the Smoothie King Center, come opening night. Come find us. Come find me. And we'll chat it up and see what's going on moving forward. The real game start next week, man. Ain't no more preseason. Ain't no more hiding. Ain't no more ducking. No smoke. You're going to have to know who your starting 5 is and who your rotation is because these count. So, as always, follow myself at Garrick_Rattler. Follow my brother at Raphael_Rattler. Follow the page on Twitter at NO_Basketball, no E. NO_Basketball, no E. Most importantly, subscribe to NewOrleans.Basketball, and we'll see you guys next time.